Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fascinating, a real paradox in the business world. We are digging into Rihanna, billionaire, total business powerhouse with Fenty Beauty, Savage X Fenty. But she lost, what, $36 million? A staggering amount trying to get her high-end fashion line, Fenty Maison, off the ground.
It's a huge figure, right? And you have to ask, how does someone usually so incredibly savvy, such a successful investor, get it so wrong? We've looked at sources covering the whole thing, basically from day one with LVMH, that's Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, right through to the quiet end.
Yeah, so our mission today is really to unpack the mechanics here. Why didn't that magic touch the one that works so well in music and beauty translate to luxury fashion? We're looking at the strategy, the operational hiccups, what lessons came out of trying to break into an industry that thinks in centuries, not just seasons.
Well, the core issue, the sort of dangerous assumption right at the start, seems to be this idea celebrity equals automatic trust. I mean, Rihanna has this massive global following, no doubt. But the sources are pretty clear. Luxury buyers, they operate differently. They're not primarily buying fame. They're buying heritage, history, that kind of mystique.
And Fenty Mason, this was LVMH's first new brand launch in decades, right? That's a massive deal, putting her name beside Dior, Givenchy. But like you said, if you're buying a, $5,000 Vuitton bag, you're not looking for what's brand new. You want that legacy. The sources suggest the market saw Fenty Mason as a big statement, but maybe not luxury in that traditional sense.
Exactly. The whole thing was kind of built on the idea that Rihanna's name alone could just rewrite how people see luxury. But, the established players, the history, it just didn't bend that easily to novelty. It hit a wall pretty quickly.
Okay, so the basic idea was maybe a bit shaky, but let's talk operations, because that seems to be where things really started to crumble. That LVMH partnership sounds amazing on paper, all that infrastructure, the access, but sources say it was flawed from the get-go.
Yeah, it ended up being more of a bottleneck than a launch pad, strangely enough. Like you said on paper, LVMH handles infrastructure, production, the money side. Rihanna brings the vision, the image. But what that actually meant was Rihanna took on all the public risk. If it failed, the headline is, Rihanna's brand fails. LVMH, well, for them, it's just an experiment, data for the next attempt.
Right. And then there's the bureaucracy thing. It's fascinating because Fenty Beauty is so agile, right? Reacting to social media, trends. But insiders were saying with Fenty Mason, that creative spark just hit these massive corporate walls at LVMH.
Oh, completely. Decisions apparently took forever. Everything needed central approval fabrics, photo shoots, you name it. So that energy, that speed you need for a new fashion brand, it got bogged down. LVMH is like this huge ocean liner. Rihanna needed something nimble, like a speedboat. The partnership existed, sure, but they weren't moving at the same pace at all. It just hampered everything.
Okay, so operations were tricky, but maybe not even the biggest issue. That might be the pricing. Let's shift into the market misalignment.
The pricing was, well, a critical mistake. It basically shut the door on her core fans straight away. When those first collections dropped, people expecting something maybe aspirational but accessible found, like $900 denim jackets, $450 t-shirts, coats hitting $1,500.
Hold on, though. Wasn't LVMH supposed to be the expert in luxury? Why price out the very people who made Fenty Beauty such a phenomenon? Was it, like, arrogance? Thinking her name alone justified those couture-level prices instantly?
Sources seem to point to a mix of things. Confidence, definitely, but also just the sheer cost of starting a small-scale luxury line within that massive LVMH system. But yeah, the result was immediate alienation. Fenty Beauty was all about welcoming everyone. Fenty Maison felt like a barrier. And luxury insiders, they kind of dismissed it quickly as, celebrity retail that hadn't earned its place.
And that leads right into this identity problem, doesn't it? They wanted luxury rarity and Gen Z inclusivity. They called it luxury without exclusion, using diverse models, which was pretty radical for high fashion.
But that paradox, it never really got resolved. It just created confusion. For the traditional luxury crowd, it felt maybe too inclusive, too fast-moving. They like scarcity, remember? But for her mainstream fans, the price was just way, way too high. So it got caught, between these two worlds, pleasing neither.
And the clothes themselves reflected that confusion, apparently. Even critics couldn't quite pin down the aesthetic. Was it streetwear trying to be couture, or the other way around, couture pretending to be street?
That's a really subtle but important point. Usually when big houses do streetwear as couture, they take something casual, a hoodie maybe, and make it luxurious. Materials, tailoring, construction. But critics felt Fenty was doing the opposite. Really expensive, complex tailoring on these big, oversized shapes that Well, they looked striking, but didn't project one clear, strong vision.
Right. And in luxury, ambiguity is weakness, isn't it? You need that instantly recognizable look. By mixing things up so much, Fenty Maison just struggled to say what it was.
So you got structural issues, pricing problems, and then bam. The pandemic hits. You have to remember, timing is everything for a new brand. And that retail collapse basically cut off their oxygen.
Yeah, global retail dropped, nearly 25% in 2020. That hurts established brands, sure. But for a newcomer like Fenty Maison, launched mid-2019, tiny retail presence, those fixed costs just became impossible. They couldn't switch to digital fast enough. Production stopped in Europe. Any momentum just died.
Definitely. But sources also stress it wasn't just external factors. There were internal misses, too. Specifically, ignoring the early data. The digital analytics, the stuff that tells you what's really happening. They are apparently flashing warning signs early on. Things like repeat buys were way below target. The first drops sold out on hype, okay, but engagement fell off fast after that.
So instead of looking at what people were actually buying or not buying, they just kept focusing on the look. Fashions are, yeah, but retail's got to be about the numbers, too. Making these acclaimed collections that don't sell consistently, that just burns through cash, especially at luxury prices, adds up to that $36 million.
Precisely. And then there's the double-edged sword of celebrity itself. Rihanna's fame meant the brand was instantly known everywhere, but it didn't have credibility with the fashion old guard. They saw it more as like a spectacle, entertainment, not really fashion evolution.
You can see that in the marketing too, right? It's all Rihanna, Rihanna, Rihanna. There wasn't much room left for the clothes to tell their own story, build their own identity.
And that's critical in luxury. Luxury usually whispers, it builds over time with craftsmanship, subtle stories. Fenty Maison, because where it came from, just shouted celebrity. That guaranteed eyeballs, sure, but it kind of killed the mystique luxury needs.
Okay, let's talk about the end game, the aftermath. When the news dropped, LVMH didn't say shut down. They said pause operations. That feels very deliberate.
Oh, absolutely calculated. Corporate language 101. They used pause to try and save face, protect any remaining brand value, and it allowed them to quietly sell off the leftover stock without a big, messy failure sale. It was damage control, framed as maybe coming back later.
Which brings us to this idea of asymmetric exposure. That $36 million sounds like a disaster. Yeah. But for LVMH, with revenues in the tens of billions, sources figure most of that loss was tied up in stock they couldn't sell and maybe some short-term shop leases. For the corporation, it's like, okay, experiment didn't work, note it down. A rounding error almost.
Exactly. But for Rihanna, the reputation hit was huge and very public. When a giant conglomerate fails, it's just data. They adjust the algorithm. When the person whose name is the brand fails, that becomes part of their story. Her business sense was suddenly questioned, right out in the open.
And maybe the biggest loss wasn't even the money. Yeah. It was the focus, the opportunity cost.
Yeah.
All the time and energy spent on Fenty Maison. That was time not spent on Fenty Beauty or Savish X Fenty, which were booming. Bandwidth matters.
Right. But the pivot she made after was, frankly, brilliant. Showed real business smarts. She took that energy and immediately plowed it back into the brands that were working the accessible, inclusive ones she actually controlled. That failure, it became leverage for her.
How do you mean leverage?
Well, sources confirm she basically used the whole experience to redraw the lines for any future deals. Going forward, she made sure she had full equity control. No more shared governance, no more corporate bottlenecks getting in the way. She started building ecosystems she owned completely. Essentially said, I don't need validation from these luxury giants anymore. That $36 million, it was the price she paid to buy back her total independence.
Wow. That's a powerful lesson for anyone in business, isn't it? The failure forced her to build her empire on her own terms. Total control.
So if we synthesize this for the broader industry, what's the big takeaway? I think it's pretty clear. Influence isn't the same as infrastructure. You can have all the fame in the world, but building real luxury. That takes operations, patience, telling a story over time, understanding the customer psychology deeply.
And a timeline, right? That was just impossible. The industry veterans apparently saw it coming. Luxury builds slowly, carefully. She tried to do in like 18 months what brands like Dior took decades, centuries even to achieve. Luxury rewards patience. Speed is its enemy, really.
Yeah, her ambition was huge. Trying to blend inclusivity with high couture, it was pushing boundaries, maybe just faster than the market was ready for.
So the brand itself is gone. But that loss, that $36 million tuition fee, as you could call it, it totally sharpened her focus. And out of that came one of the most powerful independent female entrepreneurs we have today. the failure kind of became part of her success story, ironically.
It showed her she needed to control the how, not just the what. The mechanics, not just the message.
Right. So building on everything we've talked about today, here's something to think about. Rihanna tried to redefine luxury, make it inclusive, but maybe the timing was off. The market wasn't ready. So the question for you is, do you think the luxury world is still not ready for that kind of inclusive, celebrity-driven concept? Or was Fenty Mason just a few years ahead of its time? Something to chew on.